am Erin Moat. I'm the CEO of Innovate EDU. And today we are doing the first in a two-part series around decoding the AI executive order, what K-12 leaders need to know. At the end of this webinar, we're going to be sharing with you how you can sign up for part 2, which will be on June 5th. So get ready for that. And I will be welcoming a distinguished group of experts, panelists, colleagues, and friends to really be in a candid discussion around the AI executive order. Before we do that, though, it's really important that we have a set baseline of knowledge about what's in the EO. So we're going to go through a sort of just the facts presentation around the content in the AI executive order. Let's go that next slide. So the AI executive order really follows a set of actions that have been happening in the executive branch. And we're going to lead folks through that journey and then get to the content. So we at EdSafe AI believe that AI is an arrival technology. It's going to transform the way we work, we live, and we learn. And this work has led us to really be thinking about work on AI literacy and proficiency, and really thinking about how we drive understanding of what is AI and AI literacy for young people, for educators, and for communities. We host, along with other organizations, National AI Literacy Day. And as we're thinking about the AIEO, it's really important for you to understand that the goal here was really around the White House establishing a national policy to integrate AI into education. These are not mandates, but this is a policy framework, a set of activities, and a set of directives. There are 5 that we're going to talk about today. This ties into work that happened and was announced in January around the development of the AI Action Plan with OSTP, the Office of Science and Technology Policy, and the National Science Foundation. These documents are due to be published at the end of July, and these two actions are actually following a parallel track that will have inputs across. Next slide. Oh, looks like we're having some slide issues. Great. So as I said, the AIEO builds on a January 23rd executive order that talked about the Trump administration's policy and their vision around AI and society. And really that focus was 3 pillars: enhancing economic competitiveness through AI. So how do you foster growth in AI-driven industries? It's important to name that that's a very broad set of industries in this space. 2, how do you boost national security with AI and with technology? And so in particular, that AIEO from January 23rd, just 3 days after inauguration, really focused on the national security focus for AI. And the 3rd, which for us in education is a welcome set of language around how do we promote human flourishing in an AI era. And so how do we think about ensuring the ethical use of AI in this space? This policy was really around maintaining global dominance in these 3 pillars and ensuring that the US had a leadership role. Next slide. Just to dig down a little bit deeper, when we talk about national security and competitiveness, this January 23rd executive order really talked about how AI could be in the national security interest and in the economic advantage. You'll see some threads of that come through in the EO that's the primary focus of today's conversation, particularly around workforce. The other thing we want to highlight is the framing of human flourishing was really around how do you work alongside AI rather than AI replacing humans? What are the conditions that would create human flourishing in our society? Again, really important as we're thinking about pulling the science of learning and development closer to learning experiences, particularly around AI. Next slide. Okay, to the meat of the content now. So the AIEO that concerns K-12 education, higher ed, and workforce was released on April 23rd. You can see the core policy statement there. I won't read it to you, but again, this idea of foundational AI literacy and training, particularly not just with young people, but also with educators, was a big focus of this EO. And really, when you look again at the AIEO and the fact sheet side by side, you want to look at both of those documents, really important to get some of that context. There were 4 key rationales for this development. One, how do we demystify AI for young Americans and not leave it for them to figure it out on their own? How do you spark curiosity and creativity? Again, that human flourishing pillar coming through there. How do you prepare students for the future of an AI-assisted workforce? Again, not AI replacing the workforce, but working alongside. And then finally, how do you again think through that national security and economic competitiveness piece in terms of continuing to have the US be dominant in terms of global innovation? Next slide. Okay, I told you there are 5 pillars in the EO, and these are them. We're going to go into each of those. The first is an White House AI Education Task Force. The second, a presidential AI challenge. The third, improving K-12 education through AI. This is really the how of the order. The fourth, enhancing AI training for educators. So this idea that it's not just students and communities that we need to be thinking about AI literacy for, but it's how do we think about AI literacy for educators as well. And there were some funding priority outlines, which is important to think about the existing funding streams that may or may not exist to support this work. And then finally, workforce development and apprenticeships, training linkages to workforce and talent development. Next slide. Okay, so key initiative 1, this is the task force. It will be housed out of the White House. It will include, and this we think is a really exciting sign, folks from across agencies, including education, labor, and agriculture. We'll talk about why agriculture in just a second, but also folks from energy and other relevant agency heads. Their mandate is very clear. They are to work together immediately to begin to coordinate federal efforts around AI literacy and proficiency, develop strategies for integrating AI into K-12 education, looking at how to oversee teacher training in AI, and then also thinking about how to create programs for early exposure of AI concepts. There you can think about machine learning, ethical reasoning, so on and so forth for students. That might also include data science or computer science as well. Next. This presidential AI challenge. So the timeline for this is a little bit longer, 90 days for the plan around how this challenge is going to run. It's likely going to be modeled after the congressional challenges that we've seen in the past. And then 1 year from when that plan is submitted. Again, so 90 days, the plan. From that further 90 days, a year for this to be implemented. And really, there's a couple what we would consider corners of this structure. One is around engaging multiple age categories where it's permissible by federal, state, and local privacy laws. Regional competitions, again, this idea around access and opportunity, varied themes to think about different types of AI application. And then finally, it's really intended to invite public-private partnership as well from government, academia, philanthropy, and industry. Next slide. There's a lot here in the pillar number 3. So first, this call to public-private partnerships. The timeline for this is 180 days following the announcement of the first partnerships. So we'll see what that looks like. And the goal really is to develop online resources there for AI literacy. The next component is around discretionary grants. So it's really important to remember that the jurisdiction that the executive branch has over grant priorities is really in the discretionary grants bucket almost exclusively. Those are often set and directed through secretarial priorities, and that decision is actually made by Congress, what grants are within secretarial priorities and what are discretionary or not. It's really, I'm highlighting that for folks because that also means that there's going to be some funds that could be available in terms of mechanisms that aren't discretionary grants, titles 2, 4, for example, which could be used to expand AI literacy training. But again, those are congressionally appropriated. And so there's a real difference between the buckets of money that are discretionary and those that are congressionally appropriated. And it's also important to name that even when they're discretionary, the ability for those grants to be discretionary is still managed by Congress. So 90 days, this task force has a lot of work. I know we're going to talk about that later, to identify what existing federal AI resources could support partnerships with state and local agencies, and again, what mechanisms could be used. And then it directs action from the Department of Education. I know that surprised a lot of people, to publish guidance on using discretionary grants for K-12 AI, and also to identify and implement ways to use existing research programs to assist state and local efforts in using AI for improved student achievement. That's another thing that's important to pull out here. If you look at the fact sheet and the EO side by side, one of the real aims here is to think about how AI can improve student achievement. And then finally, for NSF, how to prioritize research on the use of AI in education. Next slide. Enhancing training, for AI educators. So the prioritization of teacher training. This directs discretionary grant funds for teacher training, but also we want to name some other vehicles, Title II, Title IV, maybe even the seed grants and SBIR are options for those funding mechanisms. Focus areas for professional development, including how to really think through the productivity interface. So not just what AI looks like in classrooms, but are there things that would save teachers and educators and others, including administrators, time? And then finally, we told you we were going to tell you why the Secretary of Agriculture was on that task team. That's because there's a specific call out for the NSF director and the Secretary of Agriculture to utilize 4-H and cooperative extension systems to address rural populations, particularly around AI literacy and AI-based tools and modalities in the classroom. So maybe you were scratching your head about why ag was in the room. That's the why. And so look out for that particular attention to low-resourced rural communities as something that is a priority. Next slide. Then why is the Secretary of Labor and Commerce around that table? Well, that's because this AIEO isn't just about K-12. It's really about what does that translate into for workforce? What does that translate into for training? And so within 120 days, the Secretary of Labor is going to be looking at increasing participation in AI-related registered apprenticeships. This was a priority in the previous administration. Registered apprenticeships is a massive priority in this administration. It's going to continue to really think through this. One place here is a specific call out to engagement of industry to help define what would be of relative scope and relevance in registered apprenticeships. Really thinking around how to encourage states to use WIOA funding, that's the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, to develop AI skills and support work-based learning. WIOA dollars often go to state and local workforce boards, and again, remains their purview at the state and local level, but again, giving some directionality. High school AI pathways, so coming together, labor and education, along with the NSF director to think about how high school students can use, for example, CTEs, registered apprenticeships, maybe even Pell, to arc this sort of dual enrollment focus as early as high school. And then finally, this idea that AI is a priority within existing federal fellowship and scholarship for service programs. So building the capacity again internally. That's a lot, y'all. Let's go to the next slide. It's really important here, and I think it's important to say safety is not the dichotomy of innovation here. That's something we deeply believe at EdSafe AI, and so it's important to name that there's a lot of promise in this AI EO for things that I think we know educators, communities, families, and students need support in, but there is also the need for us to really think about some of the challenges that lie ahead, particularly around implementation, around infrastructure, data privacy, and responsible adoption of AI tools. At EdSafe AI, we care a lot about that. That's why we have the SAFE framework: safety, accountability, fairness, transparency, and the efficacious use of AI in education. But again, it's important to name there's both promise here and peril, and a lot of questions that we need to answer. Next slide. But it's important we stay engaged. And so I want to highlight that shaping what this looks like is going to be what we all need to lean in on as a sector in various ways. And so we just want to name for folks that there is an RFI open right now, request for information, that immediately followed this AI EO. I think it was like within a day or two. From OSTP, again, the lead entity here, as well as NSF, to inform the AI action plan, but particularly on what the National AI Research and Development Strategic Plan should be. This is an open opportunity. Anyone can submit. Over 10,000 folks submitted to the last AI RFI for NSF on the AI action plan. This one is specifically focused on research and development, foundational research, national security, public infrastructure. The deadline for that is May 29th. And we just want to encourage everyone who might have something to say about what the National AI R&D Strategic Plan should look like, including access, opportunity, research priorities, should raise their voice and use this as a mechanism to stay engaged in the conversation. Next slide. Okay, so sort of in conclusion, as we think of sort of the pathway forward, I think it's important to name that there are key pillars in this strategy that folks should be paying attention to, not just in K-12, but in workforce and in higher ed. And really, the success of something like an EO is really in the implementation. And so it's going to rely on robust collaboration between federal, state, and local entities, sustained investment, a commitment to equity, careful, ethical implementation, and again, folks staying engaged in this conversation. Next slide. So to discuss that with me, we're going to take the slides down. Don't worry, folks are going to be able to get a copy of these slides. And please drop your questions in the Q&A. I'm going to welcome our roundtable, have folks go ahead and introduce themselves as we get started. Let's jump in. And I'd love if, as you introduce yourself, you tell us, as we're getting towards summer, what is your favorite ice cream flavor? Let's do it. I know that's a hard one, you guys. Anthony, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate the invite and the great introduction to the EO that you just gave. Great information there and very thorough. Anthony Owen, I am Senior Director of Government Affairs at co.org, State Government Affairs. I'm also the President of the National Computer Science Advocacy Coalition. Have been working with the CS community for Well, I guess since about 2015, whenever I took over and built the Arkansas, or actually started leading the newly then created Arkansas Computer Science Initiative and built that over Governor Hutchinson's term. And then I have been with code.org since 2022. And I would be in trouble by my wife if I didn't say my favorite ice cream flavor was hers, which is Bluebell vanilla ice cream. It's really not, but that's what I have to buy because that's what she likes. So happy spouse, happy house.
I love that. My Claire, my 7-year-old, only does vanilla, so they can go do Bluebell together. Christian.
Yeah, hi everybody. So Christian Pinedo, I'm from AI I'm our Director of External Affairs and Advocacy. I guess the lens I bring here is a little bit of like the pragmatic side of things. Like AI works mostly with school districts across the country to implement a lot of these changes, whether it's teacher training or policy or whatever it might be. And so the effects that this EO has on districts across the country is something that I'm particularly interested in. Um, Background is in education. I did a lot of work in California on leveraging strong workforce grant dollars for development of CTE pathway programs and shifted to the Institute for Human-Centered AI over at Stanford is where I started to dip my toe into the world of artificial intelligence. And so like putting that context into practice is something that I'm really dedicated to. Ice cream. I've been currently obsessed with the like chocolate chip cookie ice cream sandwiches at Trader Joe's. I don't know if anyone has these, but I always have a stock in my freezer at all times. If it ever gets low, I just go get it. It has to be replenished just in case of emergencies.
Just in case. Okay. What's the ice cream du jour in Chicago right now? Are you guys ready for ice cream up in Chicago?
Almost. It's almost
Oh,
time, but actually, it's my favorite ice cream flavor is from a place in Minnesota that I like have immense nostalgia for when I was growing up. It's called Sebastian Joe's. It's black raspberry chocolate chip. It is so good, and I still miss it from my days there. But Aaron, thanks so much for the invitation to this webinar and discussion. Zarek Jones, the Executive Director of Data Science for Everyone. We're a national initiative focused on advancing data science, data literacy education, data has so much to do with AI, right? You need to know how AI tools work under the hood. And so we are trying to do really deep work with math and science and social studies teachers across those subjects to integrate some of the basics of data so that students are ready for the digital world. The only other note I'll just elevate in background is I was on loan for a year to IES while I was at the University of Chicago. And I was meant as a fellow there for a short sprint researching emerging tech at large. So data science, AI, CS, cybersecurity, and trying to figure out what its implications were for the K-12 curriculum and the skills our students need. So been tracking in policy on this for a little bit. Very excited to unpack this with you all.
great. Well, let's get to it. So we're getting a lot of questions in the chat. So folks, I might tidy up our questions a little bit and get to the questions folks have in the chat. But let's start off with the executive order really aims to promote AI literacy and proficiency among Americans writ large by integrating AI into K-12 education and training educators. From each of you, what aspects of this broad vision do you find most commendable and potentially impactful for students? And what are the most significant practical challenges or potential pitfalls that school districts might face in trying to implement something aligned to this EO? Who wants to kick us off? Promise and peril, let's go.
I can kick us off. I mean, broadly, first of all, like AI literacy taking center stage in an executive order is not something I would have predicted 2 years ago. And so broadly, I'm like that. I think that's something that I'm like really excited about. I think the concept of AI literacy was something that was like relatively quiet a couple of years ago, and orgs that are likely on this call and orgs that are like on this panel have been like kind of beating the drum for the past several years, talking about like AI literacy is a foundational need that students and teachers need in order to implement this thoughtfully. I think the definition of like ethical AI is an ever shifting one, and a lot of the core needs for us as humans to understand what that means is within AI literacy. And so like generally AI literacy is, I'm really excited to see that that's a part of it. I'm also really excited to see that like teacher proficiency and teacher capacity building is another part of this EO. I think identifying that as a big need, like investing in the human capital that school districts have right now, I think is so necessary, and not investing necessarily in platforms or widgets or tools or all of those prompt engineering kind of things that's not the starting point primarily. I think investing in the things that makes school districts magical, which is like a lot of the human skill, the human teachers that are in the room, is an excellent starting point. I think like those two things being centered so much in the EO make me really happy. I think I guess the peril side of that is it is sweeping, and so practicality is like a big question. I mean, generally, I think schools are not super good at making professional development useful for teachers all the time. I feel like I remember being in the classroom and sitting through like 80% of PD sessions that I was like kind of just listening to, but not really didn't really find any nuggets that were useful. And so making sure that we're actually leveraging a lot of uh the call to action here for something that's actually practical and like moving the needle for teacher proficiency is important.
Anthony, you want to go next?
Sure, happy to. You know, I kind of have my thoughts on this, but I'm going to read something briefly. I think that it's from another governmental report, but I'll read it and then talk a little bit more about it. These deficiencies come at a time when the demand for highly skilled workers in new fields is accelerating rapidly. For example, computers and computing controlled equipment are penetrating every aspect of our lives, homes, factories, and offices. Technology is radically transforming the host of other occupations. They include healthcare, medical science, energy production, food processing, construction, and the building, repair, and maintenance of sophisticated scientific, educational, military, and industrial equipment. Does anyone out there know what report that came from? That is a 1983 report called A Nation at Risk. And in that report, it called for every student to have a half credit in computer science before graduating high school. And I think that is where we are still as a nation as we look across it. AI is part of computer science. You really have two buckets. You have the teaching of AI and the teaching with AI. Teaching of AI is strictly a computer science concept, where the teaching with AI is a pedagogical or AI literacy, if you want to call it, pursuit. So, you know, to the question, the thing that I like the most about the executive order is that it stressed the bringing of AI, fundamental AI instruction to every student. Well, we're only going to do that whenever it's mandatory for every student. We can sit here and beat the drum. They beat this drum since 1983 that CS was needed. You have a lot of entities on this call that has worked to get CS in there. And the only way that we can surely ensure that every student has that access and that training is through a mandate, to be honest. Now, I'm not calling on the federal government to do that. I don't think that's the federal government's place. I don't want them to do that. I think that's up to states to do and to figure out what it looks like within their state, because the practical challenge is going to be getting the teachers trained, both just in the general use of AI as a pedagogical tool, but also enough teachers trained to teach the basic foundations of how AI works.
Great. That's an excellent point, and thanks for bringing us to 1983. I love that. And to the point, I think when we talk about when you know right now when folks say, okay, we'll define AI related industries or AI related fields, just like in 1983, technology is touching the entire workforce right now. And how do we have that real, authentic conversation about what is an AI related field? I think is a really, really good point. Okay, bring us home. Promise and perils, Arik.
Yeah, and I also appreciate the call back to history. Right? I think it's important grounding. So I've been, I think, a balanced critic on the AIEO, and I put out a very short Substack listing both wins and I think some losses, or maybe call them opportunities to fix things. I won't definitely plus one to what Christian and Anthony shared. I won't re-narrate them. I think two additional wins. And again, like I really am excited about some of the things that are in here. I think there was a risk that education policy generally on AI missed K-12. It wouldn't go early enough. It would only focus on higher ed and getting students ready for specialized degree programs. It's so critical to do early exposure, as we've discussed. I'm really glad that that was included. Also, our team's been beating the drum for a while on rural outreach and making sure that students in our agricultural communities can be equipped with data, digital tools, and now AI. If John Deere tractors are like Internet of Things devices, and there's farmers need pretty detailed data and digital information to compete in an increasingly global marketplace where there's many competitors, right? So making sure that there are not communities left behind, but also that we are addressing digital divide issues. I think where there's otherwise a risk that it accelerates with AI, this EO is like sending a really clear signal of places to focus. So there are huge wins in here. There are also weaknesses. And I think I worry, a big one for me is I worry about the over embrace of apprenticeships at large for AI. I think apprenticeships can be a really great way for students to access jobs, especially if they're in their context where they have to pay their way through college. It's another easier route to workforce, or sometimes just a college degree is not the right mechanism if you're pursuing the trades. I also worry that we're designing apprenticeships for a world that's shifting beneath our feet every month to a year. And what plan is there to retrain students who get locked into a very over specialized skill in the apprenticeship context if that skill is going to get automated? And I worry that there isn't the infrastructure, the planning yet, but could be to make sure we mitigate some of those risks. A couple other just quick ones. I think there's guardrails missing on data privacy and ensuring that all students benefit from ed tech development. I think there are challenges and potential issues with some of the embrace of ed tech tools generally, and making sure that we're really careful with not disrupting the classroom models too much, but that we're doing it incrementally so that teachers are able to adapt to the new tools being integrated over time. And I think a big one for me is the context in which the EO was released. Most of the all the sections that Aaron just outlined in the overview all rely on discretionary grant programs that the administration is otherwise cutting in the background. Right, the task force has to its first charge is to go out and identify funding opportunities to get all this work done. I don't know how they're going to do that when ed and NSF cuts that directly fund STEM education research and AI literacy grant projects are getting cut at the same time. And so it feels like two ships passing in the night, or one hand is not talking to the other. And I think there's a lot of work to do that Congress can now step in through the appropriations process and fix. So my main call to action is, this is a great charge and a great roadmap. Now we need to fund it.
I really appreciate that. I want to get to one other tension before we get to Q&A and give it, because we have a lot of great questions coming in, but I think if I ask this one, I can knock out a couple of them all at the same time. So a key component of the EO is the establishment of this White House task force on AI and education. We started talking a little bit about what that looks like, but also the inclusion of public-private partnerships to develop K-12 education resources, industry-informing apprenticeship and workforce initiatives, so on and so forth. In what ways do you all think this collaboration could be genuinely beneficial for AI and education? And then conversely, what are the potential risks or areas of concern? And I want to reflect some of the things that I've heard from the field in terms of areas of concern. And actually, they've showed up in some of the questions already today. Commercial influence, access, opportunity, making sure that everyone has access to these opportunities. You just brought this up, just the soundness of pedagogy and making sure that tools aren't just being used for tool's sake, but how are they being integrated into learning experiences that build critical thinking, build the capacity to work in multifunctional teams, build creative problem solving. These are like three of the very most important skills we know that young people are going to need to prevent things like cognitive offloading and some of the dangerous effects of just sort of rote memorization and use of these tools. And so how do we navigate this calling in of public-private partnerships, but also some of the challenges that might present that people are, frankly, like rightly concerned about right now? Who wants to start?
I can try and kick us off. So
Great.
I'm even thinking of like possible like public-public partnerships, right? I'm also thinking like we're also in the context of NAIR also kind of being stood up right now and getting launched. There's a lot of opportunities for research organizations, universities to leverage data, compute resources via NAIR that will then get built into resources that can be accessible to K-12 systems,
Christian,
particularly
can
like,
I just pause you real quick just
yeah.
to give people context around NAIR? Because I'm like a acronym police sometimes. So NAIR is a national AI research center that allows for shared data and computing resources, the ability for there to be tools and public infrastructure in place to support sort of the AI learning development enterprise outside of just one company. It really is meant to be a national infrastructure. And there's it was stood up in the previous administration, has continued to be really championed by industry, and is also now being championed through congressional bipartisan support, to Zarek's point about like we need Congress to step in here and appropriate and authorize. So go back. I just want to make sure that we give everybody the context to know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm often lost in the alphabet soup too, so I
Me
appreciate the police.
too. Me too.
But yeah, essentially like leveraging this tech is extremely expensive, resource intensive, and it takes a lot of expertise, like stuff that K-12 systems don't have. And if NAIR can be one pathway, along with public partnerships to democratize a little bit of this access to compute resources, data sets, to skills, that's like one possible thing that I'd love to call for more action on. Something else I live in San Francisco. I live like steps away from the school district here. I think the school district had a private company fund smart thermostats get installed in every building within the district, and with the goal of trying to make the buildings more energy efficient. That didn't really happen. I think the idea that you can just install a smart thermostat on a Victorian building doesn't make it more energy efficient. You have to look at kind of existing things that are gaps. Like you have to look at the drafty windows or whatever it might be that's actually causing energy inefficiency. Like this is what I'm a little bit anxious of when it comes to public partnerships as well with when it comes to AI and education. Like we're not looking to implement new widgets. We're not looking to implement new like high-tech solutions like on top of existing fragile systems that are likely in budget deficits already, systems that are likely don't have the human capital to leverage. And so like it really is a risk of piling on tech or just even resources that are not pragmatic or not actually useful. I think making sure that practitioners are actually the ones driving these conversations rather than I'm going to unlock all of this money for this cool tech to be implemented across the district. That doesn't really quite make it effective. And so making sure that we're balancing those two things is something that I'm really anxious of keeping track over the next couple of months.
I'll jump in with a few other thoughts on public-private partnerships, and so I think first off, another win at the EO is that it is state and local focused, and industries across the economy are going to have really different responses to AI, and there's going to be different types of integration of digital tooling depending on the sector that is most prominent in your community, and so I think that is important, right? And to be able to get state leaders, higher ed, industry, folks, all those folks at the table and have those be locally driven is important. And I think the flexibility is an asset. The flexibility is also a risk. Same time, and I think one of the big things that I'm worried about is, industry can provide the latest and greatest AI tooling, right? We know the AI models are refreshing very fast. I think that is really critical to make sure that we're getting the latest and greatest to our school districts, that we're not withholding and trying to dumb it down for kids. I think at the same time, I'm worried that all the publicly funded education research that's been done over the past 10, 20 years on high quality pedagogy, best instructional practices, et cetera, are going to get ignored. And then, another hand issue, I think Joe Barche's reporting that showed that 3/4 of NSF funding has hit STEM education. We're going to drop that in the chat so folks know, this is, you can't be doing one thing and the other at the same time, I think, for the end result to be effective. I think the last thing I just mentioned is that, and this is really focused on the skill building side for students and maybe less so the technology in the classrooms question. I think the employer maturity of what AI skills we actually need long term is not there yet. And we need a lot, and I think the EO calls for this. We need a lot more research from like, cutting edge labor economists and folks in industry who've been thinking about this for a long time to make sure we're guiding on the right student learning outcomes. Our team's been working on a whole project to build learning progressions for students to go K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12. I know Christian's team has been thinking about AI literacy frameworks. I know the code team has been doing this as well. Like there's a lot of research starting to surface what are the concepts and competencies that students need. I want to make sure that that's holistic when analysis is done and when student learning targets are set.
Great. Anthony, bring us home here before we get to Q&A. And just so I can voice it over to folks, I put this in the chat a couple times. Please, if you put a question in the chat, please bring it into the QA module. We're probably not going to be able to get to all the questions, but the panelists and I will think through how we can make sure that we post something or do it in some show notes when we post this webinar, slides, and video on YouTube. Anthony.
Thanks, Erin. And I'll echo a lot of what Christian Zarek said without saying it again. But, my first go-to thought whenever I read this question was honestly, it took me back to whenever I served as the director of CS in Arkansas. And, the moment people found out that we had money to spend on CS education, you would be amazed at the number of calls of people who wanted to be involved. And, some of them had great intentions. Some of them just was looking for a quick buck. So my biggest thing that I hope that the task force looks at when they're looking at what public-private partnerships to form are what entities are out there that have established history in doing right things for students. And doing things for the benefit of students more so than the benefit of their shareholders, or situations like that. And I'm not saying all for-profit entities are bad. I'm just simply saying that they have a bottom line they have to look at. The other thing is that I will say that a lot of this type of thought process has already been done through our Teach AI initiative. There are over 60 government organizations that are part of our Teach AI initiative that has developed policy guidance. There are several for-profit and nonprofit entities, a lot that are on this call. And as Zarek mentioned, there is already guidance out there of what should be included in student learning. I also agree with Zarek that I think that industry doesn't completely know yet. The biggest benefit that I think we have as a nation facing us right now in this, there are a lot of negatives that we can focus in on, but I think the biggest benefit that we have is that we have states that know the economic needs of their state, the industrial needs of their states, and they, with the proper guidance and support, can develop the skills and the skill sets and the knowledge that they know that their students will need around this, but they're going to need us to support them in doing that.
To stay engaged is one of the things I hear you saying, and draw from some of the richness in the ecosystem that already exists as well. Like we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. There's already boots on the ground, wheels in motion, that type of thing. Is that right? Yeah.
Correct. AI is not a new thing. I mean,
not a new thing, y'all.
AI is just getting a lot of focus right now because of the generative nature of AI, but it's not a new thing.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. I had more questions, but yours are so much better. So we're gonna go to the QA section. I am gonna do my best to potentially group some of these. And panelists, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna sort of just call on kind of one set of folks to answer this. Christian, I'm gonna give the first one to you. Thinking about how we're defining AI literacy, what's the difference between educating about AI, operational efficiency through AI, and being a developer of AI? I know you guys, everyone on this call, every panelist here has thought about this. I want to voice this first one over to you because I think you all released a report today actually about this that I want to give you a chance to talk about.
Yeah, this is, I mean, I'm really, really excited to see conversations shift from operational efficiencies to actual student level efficacy or teacher level efficacy when it comes to like AI conversations. I think like a year ago, everyone was worried about implementing AI education for the sake of efficiency, like teacher tools, district level tools, like ways students can use it. I think we're like finally thinking a little bit more critically about like actually what are the learning outcomes that we want to see here. As Zarek and Anthony mentioned, like there's so many learning progressions that are outlined and have been frameworked and exist out there. Um, what I'm really anxious to see is if we could actually lean into these and how can you kind of cut through a lot of the hype cycles that we're seeing with shifting workforce landscapes, shifting capacity of these AI tools. Like these hype cycles tend feel very quick, especially compared to like the dot-com boom. Like the way that we're reimagining a little bit about what the future of work looks like, what kinds of skills we want to develop. It's really easy to get a little bit lost in the sauce. Um, I think centering in on these kind of like human-centered capacities, competencies that we want to build over a learning progression over time that are pedagogically sound and likely aren't a huge sidestep from what we're doing already. It's just making sure that we're like doubling down on the skills that are really, really important and then maybe not focusing on skills that are not going to be super helpful in the future. Identifying what those look like. There's tons of people doing really effective research in the space. Um, and then when it comes to like curricular resources in order to do this, I think making sure that those curricular resources are open source, making sure that they're adaptable and like modular in order for them to be actually implementable, is that even a word? That they can actually be implemented is a starting point. In terms of like helping to navigate a lot of that, a lot of just like waves of resources that are going out to teachers. I think we're leaning like making sure you're leaning on more local organizations, whether it's the county offices of education, ESEs, RESAs, whatever that might be, to help shift through a little bit of that noise for educators to kind of get a little bit more about what's practical.
Let's click down one more step on that. Some questions in the chat, Anthony, for you. Two I want to pull out. One is when we're thinking about those AI competencies, I know y'all have done some great work on that. If you want to highlight, I talked about critical thinking, creative problem solving, working in multifunctional teams. Maybe people don't think those are AI competencies. I think they're AI competencies as well. Would love for you to highlight some of the work. And then I also want you to address, if possible, in your answer, you talked a lot about it a little bit, but like there are some folks who are talking about a trade-off between computer science and AI. And so can you tackle that as well as we talk about literacy competencies, comp sci? Here we go.
Yeah. So, that's as I think it was Zarek earlier mentioned that it's a moving target, and he in his discussions of the internships, it's like we're building internships for a moving floor, and I think that's a lot of what we see right now in the what is AI literacy, what are the competencies. There are certain fundamentals that should be taught, and those are those aspects of where AI fits within the larger CS umbrella. So I'm going to kind of combine my answer into two different questions. It still comes down to basic computational thinking, the training of computers, the training of systems, and to Zarek's organization, large data. AI is I think back to a meme that I saw several years ago that had a mask that said computer science on it, and when the mask was removed, it just had statistics and under as the face below it. And I think now we have the mask that says AI on it, and you remove it, and it just says statistics with high computing power. And that's really what we're talking about. So the competencies around AI, if we're talking about it as teaching about AI, they're going to be fundamentally aligned with what is already fundamental computer science instruction. It's just going to be with that additional power and with those large data sets and how you train those models. If you're talking about the side of teaching with AI, again, that goes back to a teacher pedagogical method that, to Christian's points earlier, I believe, that we have tons of research over years that show what are good pedagogical pursuits. They're pedagogical pursuits and practices. They're not going to change just because of this new technology, those best practices. It's just going to modify how we implement those best practices. So to your question of how does AI fit under CS, or how do they play well together, it's exactly what I said. Artificial intelligence, machine learning as teaching about neural networks, systems training, etc., is a computer science concept. It's under that larger umbrella. Whereas AI literacy more broadly is a teacher concept.
Great. Okay, I want to bring up a set of questions around access and opportunity, and there's several in the Q&A. And so thinking about how all students have access to these opportunities. And particularly, I think we mentioned earlier that this EO was released with 6 others at the same time, 2 in particular that folks are asking about, which is the school discipline EO and the disparate impact EO. I'm not asking folks to, go into a deep legal explanation here about that. But how do we hold this all together? And I'm gonna flip over to Zark to address this, because I think you already started to say this is like 2 folks not talking to each other, ships passing in the night. How do we hold this all in tension, particularly around access and opportunity? And in your comments, if you could also hit, folks are asking about access and opportunity in the context of the digital divide. Not all schools and communities and students have access to the internet still in our country. And so what do we do about that?
It's a big question.
I know.
But I appreciate it.
I know you can take it on, because I know you can.
I think, and this is what Christian's team, I think, said, you all had an op-ed on this recently, like the opportunity here in front of us, we could be taking a swing as big as what we did in the space race for investing meaningfully in the education sector. And as it stands as of today, this is a nice vision and a blueprint without the resources, without the heft, without the game plan underneath it yet to enact scale to truly reach all students in the sector. And I'm skeptical that a K-12 school or district leader, and we'll hear from them in the next one, can meaningfully respond to this when title dollars are both getting cut and completely restructured. We know that there's still a commitment to preserve Title I, but where that lands is unclear. Discretionary grant programs for all the research that NSF was leading on these topics has been cut by 55%. That just, for a general stat, discretionary programs for teacher training have been halted and canceled. And then the most recent one that I do want to call attention to folks is Wi-Fi hotspots for rural communities. The Senate just passed yesterday, or I think last week.
Last week.
Yeah, last week, thanks. A provision saying that they are canceling that program from E-rate and making it prohibited the schools and districts and access Wi-Fi hotspots in rural communities. If we care about engaging rural students in the President's AI Challenge, how's that going to happen if they can't access internet? Because we just canceled that program last week, right? And so, there are a lot of holes to fill. I think there are a lot of creative ways that states and industry can step up, and the federal government needs to be doing that in tandem with them, because there are huge downstream consequences when we're making those decisions, just as this blueprint also comes out. I think my greatest fear is that this executive order, just amidst all the other disruptions that school leaders are now dealing with, becomes a tiny blip on the radar that's easily ignored. And that we don't create a competitive workforce that can go to bat with other countries on AI development in the next 10, 20 years. Then we don't have a population that's ready to integrate and deploy and customize AI models, regardless of what sector that they work in. But we know it's going to be different and look different in different places. I think the goals are getting, the really admirable goals are getting undermined at the exact same time with other directives that are coming out. And so there needs to be a lot more work done. And I think there's a great window for Congress to now act, to step in and really take this all the way. And the administration has clearly signaled that is the goal, right? That's North Star, and we need to follow it, but we need to make it serious.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in my congressional testimony, I talked about this as an arrival technology like electricity or the internet, and that needs a foundational infrastructure. And again, compared it to the space race. So I think it is that moment. Okay, in one less than a minute, if each of you could say, like, there was a curriculum, a pedagogical practice, something that you feel like is a gap right now in our space, just one, what would it be? Lightning round. Let's start with Anthony. What's a known gap besides everything we've talked about today?
Um, I was hoping Zarek or Christian would go first on this one. To be honest, I wanted to hear what they had to say. I will say that while it may not be a direct answer to your question, Aaron, I think that the thing that we need to remember is that we are already behind as a nation. So we're behind a lot of other countries, and I'm going to link a report in the chat to everyone. And I want you to notice the date on that. That is September 2021. And so we are just now talking about something that our largest global competitors, economically, militarily, etc., have been looking at for years and have a lot of space in front of us. So I think our biggest gap right now is we have to play catch up.
Great. Christian, we're playing catch up.
Yeah, I mean, beyond the access gaps that I'm sure everyone here is very intimately aware of, I think there's a thematic gap that exists of like relevance that education has for the real world right now. If like we're in a world right now where kids go to school for 12 years and still might have to do vocational classes or certification classes or higher education in order to actually be career ready. I think like that isn't a very like effective education system if it still requires a lot of other things on top of that for kids to be career ready and work and ready to be citizens. And so making sure that that relevance gap or like how practical education is for the real world is closed.
Right. You got to make it meaningful. Zarek.
I'd say, and the EO almost got there, but I just like a clip deeper, teacher prep, and getting your pre-service new folks into the teacher pipeline, and the resources and the curriculum for the 100 largest teacher colleges across the country, to be able to be preparing new teachers coming to the system who are not just getting a light touch dusting 1 hour PD on this in their district, but a serious meaningful preparation in all the emerging technologies that our three orgs represent on the roundtable here. I think I'm worried about infrastructure for prep long term.
Great. And we know we have some great orgs working on that, like AACTE and ISTE right now. So again, there's a wide ecosystem here. How are we working together? Okay, if you like part one, get ready for part two. You're going to be able to hear from some state and local leaders who are navigating, thinking through AI executive orders, what that impact is going to be in the state context, in the local context, how they're answering questions from parents at the school board. Really, really important conversation. Shout out to Keith Kruger, who's going to moderate this from COSIN for us, June 5th, 3 p.m. You can register right now. You're getting the first click to register. We're so excited to have you join us for part two. This will be posted after that webinar. So part one and part two can be together. We think it's really important to center the field and their voice in this conversation. So we'll post them together. That's how you'll get the slides. I'll talk to my fellow panelists about what we're going to do with the 26 unanswered questions, y'all, we have in the QA. I did my best. I didn't get to them all. But also, if you want to get in touch with EdSafe AI on any of these resources, so on and so forth, please reach out to us at edsafeai.org. And if you go on the website, you'll see lots of resources to every one of these organizations who was in the roundtable, from Teach AI to AI EDU to Data Science for Everyone. You'll see AI policy trackers. You'll see resources from districts who are doing this work from our amazing district policy labs. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to my roundtable panelists. You guys are awesome. I want to go eat some ice cream now, and I'll hope to see y'all back here on June 5th. Bye-bye.